Hey, we got a snack
Gato.
here.
Hey.
We got a snack. He's playing with the iPad. He's having fun.
Messing
Ooh,
up everything.
you
It's
guys can
Captain
see yourself.
Dave.
How about that?
It's me.
Yep. Pretty cool. Anyway, how are ya? How are y'all? How y'all?
Doing good. I got my waterfall going yesterday and got a lot of fresh air, and it was beautiful out. It was very nice. I got my hand all cut up doing stuff, but
That happens. So my the waterfalls in Minnesota unfroze yesterday and started flowing again because it was 76. So we got our waterfalls going too. It's pretty good. Anyway, Dave or James, what do I want to call James Dave today? God,
I don't know.
I've been having horrible trouble with names, like actors' names.
It's our melodic voices,
in all fairness, all us old white guys look alike anyway. So
You do look alike. I can't
do.
tell you apart.
Well,
at
we
all.
come. James grew up around here, so
yeah, it's true.
Yep. Well, that's probably it. Probably like
we could have ran into each other at one point.
Yeah, maybe even at a family reunion. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot. Like Kentucky family reunions ought to be fun.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, we got some AIG stuff. And James, did you want to talk about that blog or?
Oh no, I'm not done.
Oh,
I
you
get
go.
feedback and revisions, so
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to speak about the AIG crap.
Yeah. There's I just glanced at it, but I've been working on this idea about MAGA, and I'm calling it like collective angst. I think I talked about it on your show a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This whole idea that there's this, that we have, we live in a really cushy environment, right? I mean, we don't have a lot of problems. Mostly the lawnmower won't start, right? Or, the water heater breaks. That's usually the extent of our life problems for most of us that live in America.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole, but everybody has anxiety. And then when you end up switching your anxiety, or basically you cast around for things to support your anxiety, you have this anxious feeling every day as a human being. For at least 10 minutes a day, you're going to feel anxious about something because it's sort of a normal function of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you feel it, because we feel we should never feel bad, and that we should never have a bad emotion. If we're depressed for 5 minutes or we're anxious for 5 minutes, we'll go to the doctor, right, and get a prescription, or we'll cast around and try to find something to support it. Well, with social media the way it is, we can find something out there where somebody's saying, "Oh, the world is going to hell in a handbasket," or "them kids today," or it's just like, it ain't like it was back in the day when Dad used to wear a fucking wife beater shirt and hit Mom. It's all different now. So you'll find something, and then it becomes a collective angst when they start feeding back on each other and gathering together in groups, and it becomes collective angst. And then you have a name for it, and then you have a mission to go and fix this problem, that you perceive. And I think it turns out to be nothing more than a regular function of our brains, that basically we're, doomers and burners. And the interesting thing is Christianity is really fucking good at this doom and gloom stuff. The fall and it's just it's front and center of their religion and their philosophy that the world is getting worse and worse and worse, and sinners are everywhere, and we are all sinful. That we ourselves are evil and sinful and taken over, and there are demons and witches, and so they have this whole collective angst thing going, and somehow they collided with MAGA, with the political angst, and they're one big huge force right now. Yeah. And it makes us collectively ill, mentally ill collectively. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going on in this country right now. And there's a solution. Get a therapist, figure your fucking shit out. You're an adult, grow the fuck up, learn how to accept the ups and downs of life. Look around, look at the trees and say, oh my God, we have trees. Be grateful for some of this shit. But that's kind of what I've been thinking about and working on.
Yeah.
So,
anyway. Speaking of Look at the Trees, Trees broke 400 subs. So congratulations, yep. Look at the Trees.
Yeah, yes. That's awesome.
We will look at the trees. Okay, so I got a video. This is Kelvin Smith from AIG in Canada. And I looked around for credentials for him because he claims he knows a lot about evolution. And I looked around for credentials and I couldn't find any. Of course, I don't have any credentials either. But, he doesn't even appear. He hasn't even tried to make a case for what he knows. But he is running AIG in Canada, I believe. I think he's the... what the hell's his name? He's the Martin Isles of Canada right now, or the Martin Wise of Canada. So he's apparently in charge. He does a bunch of really bad shit. So anyway, I thought we'd listen to one of them. This is just a short little blurb, and I can't remember why I tagged it, but see if you can hear this. Okay, let me know if you can't.
Now, the aforementioned verse here in Matthew also alludes to two activities. One, casting for fish, and two, repairing the nets. Obviously, uncast nets won't catch anything. You have to put in the effort, or nothing will happen because fish won't get caught if no one's fishing for them. But nets with huge holes are of little use as well, because while small batches might still be possible, a couple here, one or two there, large hauls will be impossible to land, no matter how much effort is put into the casting. Obviously, any net riddled with holes is severely compromised and allows most fish to wiggle out through the gaps. Similarly, a gospel net that is severely compromised won't function well either. The sad fact is that the majority of Christians have been fishing for men using nets torn with disbelief, shredded with compromise, and
Okay, you see where he's going? Fishing for men.
Yep.
Well, that's fair. For a while it was raining, man. Now there's just a big giant lake of them. You need to go up here.
Well, to be clear, it's called Fishers of Men, correct? Scott?
Yeah.
It's Fishers of Men. Because the one we're going to look at tonight, he keeps saying fishes of men.
Yeah, okay.
But it's fishers of men.
Never in any conceivable way gone fishing. He's probably never tried to catch a goldfish out of a goldfish bowl to change the water or anything. Just
and Calvin, where do you shop for these outfits?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean no disrespect. It's a joke from Super Troopers, but what's with the Canadian tuxedo, right?
Yeah.
He's just trying to relate to the good old people, the salt of the earth people out there.
Anyway, I just thought this was the weirdest lead up to what he's talking about is apologetics, right? Going around and fishing for men and getting young men to join their cause in their church. Let's see what else he's got to say here.
added with disuse, which is why the church has seen very little results to show for all of its efforts over the years. By far, the most corrosive and damaging ideology affecting gospel witness has been the story of evolution. It has provided many a fish the means to wriggle out of the enveloping truth by tearing holes in the sin and grace aspects of the gospel presentation through the diminishing of individual moral culpability and biblical authority. What do I mean? Although there are many objections to the Christian faith, the most popular comes in some form of the question: if God is good, why is there so much death and suffering in the world? The implication embedded in this question is a moral one. So, what's the link to the story of evolution? Well, evolution requires belief in the idea of long ages to be intellectually viable. And even the majority of Christians have come to believe in millions of years of Earth's history, primarily due to the monumental layers of sedimentary rock seen worldwide that have been.
Or how about radiometric dating, dumbass? Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, how about those monumental layers of rocks? Well, God, that looks like old Earth. I don't know.
And long before dating methods, they already were estimating millions of years because of rates of deposition and the different environments in the layers. So, creationists will say observable, right? Well, these folks didn't have radiometric dating. Just by the observations, they were saying at least millions of years to get, that what they always leave out is you have a layer of ocean, you have a layer of desert, you have a layer of forest. So just looking at that, they had to figure, well, how long would an ocean be around with a bunch of fossils in it? How long was the forest around with all these trees, And they were already estimating millions of years long before radiometric dating.
Yeah, anyway, there's just a few seconds left here. Let's see.
Been interpreted by secular scientists as having been laid down over vast time periods, rather than at the time of Noah's flood. However, within the rock layers is a record of death, disease, including cancerous tumors, and suffering. So, for those who have accepted the evolutionary story, it's hard to reconcile a God of love bringing about the world via untold ages of death and suffering. For example, what kind of God would use cancer to create? How can cancer be considered very good?
I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, but anyway, there's a few things to unpack there. Hang on a second. So I'm a young man, right? And these apologists.
I would like to challenge that. I would like to challenge that.
I'm imagining.
No, according to Brad, Mike is just pretending to be an old guy online.
Oh,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm imagining I'm a young man. Anyway, and the apologist knocks on the door, and he's got a fishing net, and he wants to put me in the net and haul me in. I mean, isn't that kind of fucking weird? I mean, isn't that sort of offensive to the young man that you're going to be netted by the scheme that they're running? It's like, I mean, I don't think he thought too much about his analogy.
Well, he speaks a lot of fishing things, but he's a carpenter. Why doesn't he have more carpenter analogies? Right? I was always confused. Is he a fisherman or is he a carpenter? Because he talks like he's a fisherman.
Yeah.
We got to look at it this way. Peter and John and maybe a few other of the disciples, James, I think, were actually fishermen, according to the Bible, out on the Sea of Galilee. And so they would cast nets and bring them in. And sometimes the haul would be good.
You're botting a little bit.
Saying, hey, live your life as fishermen. I'm going to make you fishers of men, not fishermen, but fishers of men. And so it's just kind of a play on words.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean,
locals do
when you say it correctly, yeah.
Yeah. And then evolution. So he
ridiculous
says,
lengths.
he says, I studied evolution in depth, and what he found out is that it's simply a hole in the net that he's trying to cast out to drag these young men into his church. And it's like, you know, casting a net and dragging young men into your church has some really strange kind of sexual. I don't know where
A
I'm
little
going.
bit.
It just struck me as a little weird, you know, that you would use that analogy. I mean, I could see, you know, the analogy is that you're trying to give them the truth. You're trying to convince them by reason, right? You're not casting a net and catching them like a fish, because when you catch a fish, you do not reason with that fish. You put them in a net and you drag them in, you kill them and eat them. So I just think it's a little fucking weird. I mean, that's his mindset. And evolution as a whole, and it's a whole because secular scientists looked at these massive layers of rocks. No, the scientists that originally started saying the Earth was, you know, 1 million, 4 million, however million years old back in the 19th century, they were Christians.
Yeah.
I think the early estimates were up around 20 million, and yeah, they were Christians.
I think they said, I remember them starting out with 4. That what the hell was his name? I forget the name of the guy that came up with the early principles of geology, and how everything that's happening today has pretty much been happening in the past, basically. Conformism or non-conform, I forget what it is. There's catastrophism, and there's another.
Uniformitarianism.
Uniformitarianism. There you go. Anyway, so we have another video by him that we're going to look at. This is kind of a big one. I'm not sure how much we're going to get through. But it's really, there's some interesting things here, and I made a comment on this video, and he never responded to me, of course. But it's something that's been coming up as more and more recently. I've seen it in a number of videos where they're really offended that we keep telling them, you just don't understand evolution. You just don't get it. And that's what this video is about. So here's why I don't believe in it, right? And he studied it in depth. So, ready?
Yeah, we're ready. I did want to challenge one little thing, though, before we go forward.
Go ahead.
You thought that it wasn't a good analogy because when you catch fish, your intent is to destroy them, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it a perfect analogy for Christianity. Right?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
what is the cross? The cross represents slaughter. What are the sheep?
right.
The sheep are the people led to the cross, which means led to slaughter. They intend to destroy the person that you are and replace you with a copy-pasted echo of their God character, right? So he's copy-pasting himself over you. You're being replaced. This is what it means to have a new life in Christianity. The old you literally dies. So they are trying to kill you like they would a fish. They're going to devour you whole.
Right.
And then they're going to replace you with something else.
Yeah.
So I think it is kind of a fit analogy.
And then he was kind of making a big deal of evolution is about death and destroy. Like things have to die in order to evolve. No, things have to die in order for life to go on. Because if things didn't die, then there'd be nothing but one kind of life eventually, right? And it would run out of food. It'd have to start cannibalizing. So, but isn't that the same with Christianity in the fall? I mean, what is the difference? The fall brought about death and cancer and pain and all that. So, I mean, it's the same as evolution. And he's claiming Christianity is superior because it doesn't rely on death and whatever. Yeah.
And
So
the fall,
I don't understand.
I never understood that argument either. The AIG is really big on it.
Well,
Look at all the beauty in the world.
Evolution depends on procreation. It's just
life.
the competition of death.
But they'll talk about, look at all the beauty in nature. Look at the sunrise and the sunset and the beach and the mountains and the trees and the flowers. Look how beautiful it is. But then they'll say everything's cursed, and that explains the bad things, right? And it's like, well, then why isn't everything ugly if it's all cursed, right? Why isn't why do we not cower every time we see the sunrise and stuff? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
they want to convince
they
us.
speak with forketh tongueth.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do. Anyway, that whole video kind of comes back at him. I mean, the whole fish analogy, and then the trying to compare evolution to God's fallen world. They sound about the same to me, you know. And it's like,
Sure.
yeah, and evolution, like Scott said, does not depend on death. It depends on procreation, basically, on multiplying. Being fruitful is what evolution depends on. How fruitful you are.
Besides, death is a reality, and the theory of evolution lays that reality out objectively through
Yeah.
data, through observations, through measurements, through working models and things like that. A way of coping with death is to focus on it so much that you become sick with it. And that's kind of what Christianity has done. Symbols of death everywhere, symbols of that are supposed to somehow send you to God for a new life or whatever. But yeah, it's religion that focuses on death. Evolution is just objectively laying out the facts of what causes species to change and evolve into new species.
Right.
Yep.
It's important to understand too, I think, before we go forward, I promise I won't make this too long, that when we share the ideas about evolution and what it's based on, what we're predicating that on is study, is research, is scientific inquiry. We're appealing to people's curiosity and to their desire to amass knowledge and understanding about the world that they're in. Whereas Christianity, while it claims to be doing that, it's actually appealing to people's vulnerabilities. It's exploiting emotional vulnerabilities created by the fact that we're born in ignorance and that we're born into the system where there's so much suffering and death. Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity, creates a lot of the suffering that we have in our world. It creates a lot of the needless and early death that we have in our world. It then turns around and takes advantage of all that confusion, that chaos, that suffering, that death, because then they're saying, oh, we need something to rescue you from. Therefore, you need to accept our narrative. And so they're capitalizing on and they're exploiting the very problems that they worsen in society. Whereas scientists talking about evolution do no such thing at all.
Yeah.
And it's a false dichotomy or whatever the fallacy is, because most religious people don't have a problem with science, and even big apologists like William Lane Craig will work his theology around the science. They don't buck up against the science. So it's like James said, it's the, well, how do you word them? The fanaticals or whatever.
The fundamentalist evangelicals.
The fundamental, yeah, especially the young Earth creationists in this country, where it seems to dominate and not in other countries, is not representative of people trying to get rid of God. These people can accept science and still believe in God and the Bible and go to church. So it's false trying the way they set it up, that it's against specifically their religion, right? It's just not.
Right, it's not. I try to get my sister to understand this. We recently had an unpleasant conversation about these issues. And she, every time I question her narrative, she thinks that I want her to stop believing in God or stop valuing spirituality or whatever. And I'm like, no, I don't want to take those things from you. I just want you to understand that your church lied to you in order to weaponize you for an ill-conceived culture war. And that what I want for you is to migrate into a healthier paradigm, a healthier conceptualization of God, a healthy conceptualization of spirituality. And if you never end up taking that over into atheism, I don't care, right? I just want you to understand the way that they've hijacked your voice and weaponized you against the LGBT community and against atheists and for all these really horrible projects that you don't even understand the implications of.
That's again where they speak out of both sides of their tongueth, because they'll praise Christian scientists, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Look at these great Christian scientists, right? They'll point them out all the time. Look at all these scientists that were Christians. Look at all the scientists that have won Nobel Prizes that are Christians or other religions and everything. But then they'll turn right around and say, but they're all a bunch of liars, and
Yeah.
it's again it's just to their convenience of what their video or talk or whatever is. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Play clip.
And another bad outfit.
Understand it fully. Because
Whoops.
it's
What the hell happened here? Oh, something's not functioning. Okay, should function now.
one of the most common comments posted as a rebuttal to any one of our articles or videos is probably the statement, "You just don't understand evolution," which of course is not really an argument, but simply an ad hominem to the man fallacy that most often isn't really worthy of a specific response. However, to be honest, I have seen situations in which some fellow biblical creationists make statements that indicate they aren't particularly familiar with the exact mechanisms or nuances that evolution-believing scientists or even the average evolution believer might hold to. For example,
funny how Calvin doesn't include himself in that camp, even though people are telling him, "No, you don't understand evolution. You just don't. You're a dumbass."
Yep. What was he reading? Did you
I think
catch?
he was reading On the Origin of Species.
Oh,
I mean, if he's read that book cover to
oh,
cover,
it was Darwin. Okay, he was reading
if
Darwin.
he's read that
Well,
cover to cover, he's gonna be behind in his concepts and not understand evolution, because
right.
guess what? It's a field that has advanced over the last century or more, and more.
That thumbnail would have been better, Mike, with his nose stuffed in that little book.
Stuffed in that book. Yeah, I should have done that. That was good. Anyway, oh my God. So yeah, so this whole thing is based on our comments that you just don't understand evolution. And I wrote a comment down here. See if I can still see it. So what do we mean when we say you don't understand evolution? Most people get the knowledge from skimming off the very top of the pan. If you read books like Fins to Limbs and Bones and Cartilage, which I talked to you guys about, you will see the molecular biology behind evolutionary theory. Most people are not going to have the expertise to digest this material. I think it is fair to say that we have done a poor job of bringing the knowledge to the masses. But I said you do not know enough. You do not know enough to know what you do not know. That is what we mean. So basically, he doesn't know enough about it. He's got his nose stuck in Origin of the Species, and he's talking like he's some kind of an expert. And I bet he's never read Origin of the Species anyway. And even if he had, it wouldn't be an expert.
Isn't there a concept calling being doxastically closed or something like that, where if you were going to get a lot of messages that you don't understand this, you're not clear on this, a responsible podcaster or YouTuber or ministry person would say, okay, let's get some people in here who are saying I don't understand it and find out what they're saying I don't understand and listen. And then, I guess you have to go back to some of your people that you trust, which might turn you away from that a little bit. But, there's that interaction, that idea of, hey, I could be wrong and I need to clarify what I might, what they're saying. I don't think he does that. I'm not of the opinion that he does that, because, they just keep spouting what works to keep their little flock from getting all, getting their little wool all flustered, and, try to keep them giving, keep them donating, keep them writing good comments so that their algorithms.
It's a boogeyman, because they try to set up evolution as like it's its own field and separate it from biology and genetics, because once again, AIG will say, look, genetics proves this and that. And it's like, really? Again, any of their stuff, and folks have noticed this before, if you go through their videos, you can find easily where they contradict themselves. They don't have a storyline or you know what I mean? There's nothing written in stone with them. They just, whatever fits their video or their talk they're giving, it can go 180. So it's really, if anybody pays attention, you can see that there's no consistency. They're just making it up as they go, so to speak.
Yeah, if I come up to you and I ask you how something works because I truly want to know what your opinion is and how it works, right? And I'm truly open to finding out how something works, then I will sit there and I will listen to your explanation. But if I come up to you and I ask you how something works, and I don't really want, I really believe that you don't know how it works, but I do. So I'm just testing you. I'm just baiting you and saying, oh, tell me how this thing works. You're going to have a totally different attitude. No matter what the other person says, it's going to bounce off you. Or it's going to fall through the holes like fish in a net. It's just, you're not going to hear what the other person says unless you truly have an open mind. And they would accuse us of being closed-minded. And I don't think I am at all closed-minded about this. If there were a supernatural cause for this stuff, I would be like, holy shit, that's cool. What can we do with that, right? It'd be like, it would open up a whole new magical world. I mean, it would open up the Marvel universe to me, if supernatural were true. So I'm not fighting against that. And when it comes to evolution, I spend every day trying to find out how it works. And I'm very open and very, very cognizant that I don't know everything about how those things happen, right? But I want to know more, so I learn more and learn more and learn more. Anyway, but what I was pointing out in that comment is that we don't do that. There are a lot of people there are a lot of fields like physics where I have to defer to the experts, right? Because I don't have time to go and develop that expertise myself. So I defer to the experts. And I have no reason not to believe that all of the cosmologists and physicists in the world have gotten together in some cabal and started lying to me and created this big lie, right? I have no reason to believe that. So I'm going to believe what the consensus says when it comes to physics. And most people believe the consensus on evolution.
Yeah, that's another big fib they push too, is that they're only in it for the money. And a lot of scientists don't make a lot of money. So
yeah,
they think they're,
look,
they got a $10 million grant, and it's like, that scientist didn't get $10 million.
No.
That they would be lucky if that covered their, whatever field they're doing, whether it's equipment or
Have you
travel
seen the price
or
of
whatever.
Test tubes and beakers lately?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's one way to get paid really high wage and be a scientist, and that's to go to work for AIG.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can make well over $100,000 a year, but not if you're just a regular researcher.
And if you're a relative, I hear that you might get a house too. So
yeah. So I hope I caught this at the right point. We'll see.
However, I have also observed that many evolution-believing lay people and even scientists apparently don't understand what evolution is or is supposed to be either. Many times when critics show up to criticize our content, I will often post a simple statement: evolution has never been observed, which often sets off a firestorm of comments from evolution believers. And I think that's because
of a dumbass. It really does. If you're phrasing it that way, you're either a dumbass or you got your information from a dumbass. Right. Because it has been observed, but even if it's never been observed in the here and now, in the last 20 years or 50 years, we'll say, you see the evidence of it. And they're just saying, forget the damn evidence. If I don't see it, I won't. But you don't even have the training to see it. It could happen right in front of you, and you would never know it because you're not equipped and tooled to see it. So, he's just entrenching himself in ignorance.
I told Sea Science yesterday, they said, I want to observe it in real time. And I looked it up. I said, because I knew there was a real-time small mammal or something in South America. And it was actually a marsupial, but it's called the marsupial mouse. So my bad, I said it was a mammal. But in real time, they speciated, and they genetically proved that these things speciated while they were exploring in the jungle and observing this species. So if you want to get on an airplane and go to certain places, you can actually see it in real time.
Yeah,
See,
but
this
still a
this is where they equivocate on things, because then they'll say, no, that was not a speciation. That's not a new species. That's an adaptation. And
By
taking
definition,
concept from evolution and trying to make it separate from the theory of evolution.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, that's just adaptation. That's not really it. So, they have their own copes to get out of that.
But by definition, and they can argue it and just say, I don't like the definition, like all our favorite folks do.
Yeah, you got to nail down
genetically
what you're going to go by in a conversation before you
genetically,
try to
though,
deal with them.
They have speciated. There it is. They can do the DNA test. They have speciated. There you go. Well, I don't like the test. I don't like this. Okay, well, fine, whatever.
So what are they asking, though? I mean, they're asking to observe a some small rodent turning into an elephant, right? I mean, we all
in a generation, in
a generation, and that's ridiculous. The only thing you're going to see is that small rodent still be a small rodent and come up with some very slight change, and possibly spread into another get geographically separated, and you'll end up with two species. And we've seen that stuff. But I'm trying to find the marsupial mouse here. So why are they interesting? Extreme reproduction. Oh, I guess they have sex a lot. Efficient predators, evolutionary uniqueness. It doesn't say anything about. I can't find what you're talking about, Dave. But we'll because I hadn't heard of that one. But I mean, the what we do observe is we observe various kinds of mutations in the genome. And we don't just observe one nucleic acid mutating into another or changing, which amino acid is in the protein. We also observe things where sections of the genome are deleted or inserted or whole cloth duplicated and then mutated. And we see all of that stuff. We see chromosomes join and separate. And we see all of these different kinds of shuffling of the genome. That's what we observe. And from that, we can infer what happens, basically. But anyway, we'll get a little more into that. But I think we're going to go into defining evolution. Let's see if we got it. Let's see what I got for bookmarks. Let's see.
They're the mouse opossums, and they are known for their rapid speciation, with new species evolving relatively quickly.
Oh, neat. I'll have to look that up.
Linnaeus's mouse opossum under Wikipedia.
Okay.
You can watch them speciate because, like you were saying, they do it like rabbits, and you can watch. There's so many. They're breeding so much. Yeah, they can just watch, and you can see them. Whatever the little changes are, that you can watch it happen. You can see it.
Okay, marsupial mice, especially Antechinus and Dunnerts, appear to have undergone relatively rapid speciation, driven by environmental adaptation, reproductive strategies, and location or geographical isolation. While the rate of speciation is not as extreme as some groups, like the cichlid fish or the finches, they exhibit significant evolutionary diversification.
Oh yeah,
they have an extreme, extreme reproductive strategy. The male die off after mating, reduce male competition in subsequent generations, and may promote genetic bottlenecks that increase speciation potential. Yeah, it's interesting. I had to read about that. Okay, we got another clip here.
You realize that there's historical documentation stating he popularized the idea by borrowing it from several others, including the biblical creationist Edward Blyth.
He's talking about Darwin. Okay, so Edward Blyth.
One can look up copies of the Magazine of Natural History from 1835 and 1837, available online in PDF form, and read several articles by Blythe describing the process of natural selection. And remember, Darwin had only just returned from his 5-year voyage in which he was collecting specimen samples on board the Beagle in October of 1836. And so he had not yet fully formulated his evolutionary ideas. So this was all in print well over 20 years before Darwin published Origin of Species. And it's also known, and fairly suspicious, that Darwin owned copies of these articles, with even one well-known and respected evolutionist, Lorne Isley, having written an entire book called Darwin and the Mysterious Mr. X, suggesting that specific passages in Darwin's book read entirely too close to much of Blythe's natural history articles.
Oh my God, that's so damning, of Darwin, that Darwin owned, Darwin read Blythe. Darwin never tried to hide that he read Blythe. In his later books, he actually referenced him, basically. So anyway, Edward Blythe, the 19th century British zoologist and biblical creationist, wrote about natural selection before Charles Darwin. Blythe's papers from the 1830s described how natural selection could act to preserve species by removing unfit individuals. However, Blythe did not develop the idea as a mechanism for evolution in the way Darwin did. What Blythe meant is that this whole thing was designed to keep God's kinds pure. So he was a creationist, and he thought natural selection kept the kinds pure.
He thought it was a form of eugenics created by God.
Right.
No, you're not saying now, are you, that Calvin is leaving certain information out in order to impugn Darwin's reputation?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I would never say that.
And try to lessen his legacy.
So Blythe saw natural selection as a conservative process that maintained the stability of species by eliminating weaker individuals. Exactly what you said, James, ensuring that creatures stayed within their created kinds. Darwin saw natural selection as a creative force that could lead to the emergence of new species over long times. So anyway, so Blythe was a creationist who believed natural selection worked within fixed species boundaries, preventing degeneration rather than driving change. So he had a totally different idea.
And this was the underpinning idea for why Christians in that era were against black people marrying white people.
Right.
Because and so, he doesn't want to talk about that either, does he?
Yeah, so it was eugenics that he was actually getting at.
Yeah, eugenics and racism.
Yeah. Darwin was aware of Blythe's work and referenced it in Origin of Species, 1859. However, he significantly expanded the concept, linking it to ideas of gradual evolution. And Blythe's writings helped shape early discussions on selection, but he did not propose it as a mechanism of evolution. And let's see. So Charles Blythe does not explicitly reference, or Charles Darwin does not explicitly reference Edwin Blythe in The Origin of the Species, but he is aware of the writing and cited him in later works, particularly in the variations of animals and plants under domestication. So I don't know what Isley was talking about with his book. We'd have to. Isley was a pretty cool writer, and I don't think he was saying what this guy says he was saying. But yeah, that's what he's doing. He's trying to, Charles Darwin stole the idea from this creationist. It's like, what? What the fuck?
You got your wrong ideas from us.
let's say we decide today as a society to cancel Darwin. How does that affect current evolutionary theory?
Right. It doesn't at all.
Cancel Darwin, but the ideas are still there, and they still work because we have a very rich and robust set of theories regarding evolution.
They keep thinking Darwin is Jesus. He's our Jesus, right?
Yeah.
I've used Dawkins.
I've used that argument. I just said, throw away Darwin. I don't care. It was 160 years ago.
Yeah, throw away Dawkins. That was 50 years ago.
A few years before that, they were bloodletting people. I mean, so
it
was a long time ago, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, I never really think about Charles Darwin ever. He just doesn't come up in my
No.
thinking. And the only time I do is, okay, the creationist has said something about Darwin. It's probably a lie. Let's take a few hours here to run that down. Oh, I didn't need to take a few hours because he's already been debunked after just a few seconds of a search. You can find the
Right.
material that's debunking the stupid stuff that the creationists are saying about Darwin.
Yeah. Yeah, I own a copy of Origin of the Species. I have absolutely no reason to read that book. There's nothing
I too
in
have
there.
a copy, and I've not really. It's electronic, but I've never cracked it because it's old. It's 19th century writing about stuff that I don't know what Darwin says has been overturned, and what he has said that has been developed from so much that it just no real good to read Darwin. Let's read the stuff that people 150 years later have been writing, because it will be updated. It will be more reflective of our understanding of reality.
Yep. There's a bunch of stuff coming up here on, let's see here. Okay, Walter Veith. Okay, I got to say, I have a bunch of links that I've got that I didn't bother to get out. Okay, we'll go ahead. Let's see. New clip.
It's also known, and fairly suspicious, that Darwin owned copies of these articles, with even one well-known and respected evolutionist, Lorne Isley,
Oh, okay,
having
that's
written an
Isley.
entire book called Darwin and the Mysterious Mr. X, suggesting that specific passages in Darwin's book read entirely, although his thesis that Darwin had plagiarized much from Blyth and others has been criticized by many of his fellow evolutionists. Prior to his honest assessment of the facts, Dr. Isley, a PhD in anthropology, was touted as a great scholar amongst the evolutionary.
Oh, okay, so he goes on for about a minute and a half about Isley's credentials. And Isley, as far as I know, was an old Earth, not a religious person at all. He's an anthropology. He wrote a book called The Immense Journey that basically talked about how he tried to explain how much time has gone on, and he tried to get your mind around the idea that millions of years is a really, really long time. And that was Isley. But he goes on, for some reason, he goes on about Isley's credentials, and then his criticism of Darwin, and it's like, oh, that means theory of evolution isn't correct. I don't know how that follows, to tell you the truth.
Indeed, it seems to many that Darwin did some selecting of his own when compiling material for his book. Regardless, I often enjoy reminding evolutionists that as far as natural selection goes, we understand it very well.
Oh, yeah,
After
you
all,
do.
we creationists thought of it first. You see, along with most other creationists that had gone before him, such as Carolus Linnaeus, the Swedish biologist who essentially formalized our modern classification system of naming
Hold on for a
organisms,
second, please.
Blyth
He got it wrong. Well,
And there he's name
Okay.
dropping.
How many creationists have that you talk to that really demonstrate a knowledge or understanding of natural selection when they're going, why won't a rabbit evolve into a pine tree? When they start doing that, they don't understand natural selection.
AIG has a new campaign where they are adopting natural selection and saying it's not evolution.
yeah.
That evolution, it's not evolution. Evolution
Exactly.
isn't evolution. I don't know why yeah.
Ken, if you listen to AIG stuff, and especially when you hear like Georgia talking and stuff, they'll accept almost every mechanism of evolution, and then they'll say, but that's not evolution. So you no matter what you say or what you can observe, put it right in front of their face and observe it, they'll say, but that's not evolution. And then you'll
I don't
say,
wanna get
well,
too
what
political.
is? And you won't get an answer.
Yeah. I don't want to get too political, but isn't it the Congress, the certain majority block of Congress that is saying, oh, no, we don't touch Medicaid. We don't touch Social Security in our new budget bill. But what they're saying is they're not calling it Social Security. They're not calling it Medicaid. They're just doing all the little pieces that make it up. They're going after the parts and attacking the parts by name, but not the bigger
the whole. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
That it's just a political ploy of misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But he's got all those books.
Of the Bible.
What's that?
I said, but he's got all those books. I'm waiting for him to do a Sal thing and start saying,
Yeah,
I've read through this book, and there's no evolution in here. There's no theory of evolution in there.
Yeah, well, I wonder where he got all those books. Replacing. You can see replacing Darwin. Those are probably all from the AIG. They sell a lot of books. Like I say, I have like a 15-foot shelf of their books, including replacing Darwin. Anyway, fossil.
As the creator who had designed the original kinds of creatures to be able to adapt and survive in a post-fall world. Natural selection was therefore seen as the mechanism that would explain how the limited number of animal kinds God sent on board Noah's Ark would then have been able to speciate after the flood and account for.
Yeah, we heard all this shit before.
This is all, it's like Bible fanboy, fantasy, when you write a fan fiction, because none of this stuff is biblical, He's just saying, the Garden of Eden. But, they all evolved real fast, and God made it so that when they would die out, some of them would die out because they're no longer needed, and blah, 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 blah. It's just fanboy stuff or fan fiction stuff.
And he used natural selection and speciation. Notice that, sure, there's natural selection. Sure, there's speciation, see? But that's not evolution. And it's like, you can't win the argument if they're just going to say, no matter what you say, and even when they're saying it themselves, and they're saying they accept natural selection while he's bad-mouthing Darwin, whose theory was based on natural selection. It's so hard to listen to sometimes.
And I want to point out that no one has ever observed God creating anything. I mean, did you observe God creating the oceans? No, I didn't either. So it's not. So we didn't observe it.
And Mike was there. So
yeah, and I was there. Fuck you, Dave. Okay. Anyway.
Therefore, natural selection is not a creative process. It can only select from what pre-exists. Genes that aren't in the gene pool of any particular kind of creature can't be selected for. So natural selection never produces anything truly new. As Professor Walter Veith, PhD in zoology, said regarding the claim natural selection somehow evolves new creatures, the very name selection implies that you're choosing between two or more variants. Natural selection never increases the number of variants, it only decreases them. So how does a mechanism that makes...
Okay, so this guy, Walter Veith, he is, let's see, Bachelor of Science, honors something cum laude, PhD, professor at the University of the Western Cape, Republic of South Africa, held a chair in zoology, and he's a creationist, an idea. Let's see, so I've got there are articles by him on creation.com, basically. And so I don't really care what he said. But okay. So natural selection has to pick between two things that already exist. Mutation, motherfucker. If we have mutation, then we have a variation in the gene pool. And then we do have new things to pick from. And
don't you also have genetic drift and recombination, whatever? All that. One of the other things that are important that the guy never talks about.
Yeah. Did you ask a question?
Yeah, I did. Don't you have like genetic drift?
There's about a dozen of them, and I can't think of them all right now. So, duplication, deletions, insertion. There is those transposons have an effect on evolution. That's how the moth turned black from white. Basically, it was basically a transposable element that jumped into a gene and disabled it, and then it ended up not producing the white. I think is how it goes. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of different variation in gene pools, and that gets selected for, and that keeps changing on every generation. And
While
he's kind of
the concepts aren't hard, it's almost as if Calvin doesn't understand evolution, and that it's more than one moving part. Natural selection isn't the only component of the evolutionary process. That's what the following 150 years provided for us, and why I tend to believe he doesn't understand evolution, or doesn't want his flock to understand evolution, because he leaves out crucial information.
Yep. Let me turn my camera on here. Oh, I don't want that on. Why is that not working? Something's not working. Why am I on instead of something else? Interesting. Settings. Hang on a second here.
Okay, I selected you from solo layout. They're in on those little thumbnails on the bottom of the panel. At the bottom of the screen, you can click on solo layout and unclick it, and I think maybe that's getting turned on for you sometimes.
Yeah. Anyway, this is Walter Julius Veith, born 1949, a South African zoologist and a Seventh-day Adventist author and speaker known for his work in nutrition, creationism, and biblical exegesis. So he was like basically one of these creationists, and I don't really care what he says. So he grew up in a strict Catholic home. His mother Protestant, Christian all the way through, and ended up being a creationist. So big deal. This doesn't, I'm not impressed. Where's the mousey? There it is. Oh no. Okay. There he goes.
Less and less end up making more and more.
This is where he starts quote mining like crazy.
Obviously, it doesn't. But again, you can see how if you've been taught to believe that natural selection equates to evolution, this could lead to Bible skeptics accusing creationists of not understanding evolution. They might look at us as intellectual bumpkins because evidence of natural selection.
I do look at them as intellectual bumpkins.
I look at Calvin as a bumpkin.
He is a bumpkin, man. He's, he, like I said in that quote, I said, you don't know enough to know what you don't know. And that's his problem.
Selection can be observed all the time. And so, like a parent trying to help a child, they often try to explain examples of natural selection, such as pesticide resistance, or changes in stickleback fish, or finch beak sizes of moths to us, like we're 5 years old, in order to help us understand the reality of evolution.
The prize horse. I don't know what this one's going to be.
The aforementioned peppered moth is an example. It's been referred to gushingly by evolutionists as not only the poster child of Darwinian evolution, but also as the prize horse in our stable in terms of evidence of evolution via natural selection. As one evolutionist put it, it's the slam dunk of natural selection, the paradigmatic story that converts high school and college students to Darwin, the thundering left hook to the jaw of creationism. That is, of course, until all sorts of shenanigans surrounding how these studies and experiments involving the peppered moth were conducted was exposed in the book Melanism, Evolution in Action by fellow evolutionist Michael Majerus.
Okay, here's where he got it all fucked up. Michael Majerus, let's see if I can find the links for this thing. Melanism, Evolution in Action of Moths and Men. There was a book of Moths and Men by Judith Hooper about the Oxford University Ecological Genetics School led by E.B. Ford. Okay, Bernard Kettlewell's experiments, where he did this thing where he taped moths to a tree, basically to show a picture, to show an example of a black moth and a white moth. And his work was called into question. And then this Majerus guy came back. Okay, this Judith Hooper claimed there was a conspiracy theory about the errors and misrepresentations and falsehood. And then they questioned Kettlewell's work, right? Well, Majerus went and looked at it again, and other scientists reproduced Kettlewell's works, and they vindicated him. And Majerus wrote a book vindicating Kettlewell, and he's claiming that this guy is the guy that criticized Kettlewell. No, it was Judith Hooper that did that. So I don't know where the hell he got his information from. Probably from AIG, from those blogs that they write. They put down something and it becomes truth for them. So this whole thing is
where did he get that
confusing.
quote from? I didn't see a name to that quote, and he had a picture of an elderly lady. I know. There.
Yeah, I'm not sure who that was. She's familiar, but no, that wasn't her. Hooper criticized the whole moth thing, right, in a book called Of Moths and Men. And she's a journalist, basically. And this guy, Majerus, wrote a book. Let me see. I've got links. I've got links in my description to all this stuff. So, okay, Moths and Men. So, melanism. Let me go ahead and look at that one. Okay, melanism. That was his book, right? Let's see, by Mike Majerus, published in 1998, is an update of Bernard Kettlewell's book, The Evolution of Melanism. The book contains a very useful summary of Majerus's work on melanism in ladybirds and a review of the peppered moth story, including observations on moth behavior, which sparked controversy. Let's see, unevenly edited was a criticism. Jerry Coyne didn't like his book for some reason. Has been criticized. Let's see. But anyway, there's another article where basically Majerus is saying that no, this moth thing is real, and it most certainly is. It was a jumping ALU that jumped into a gene, changed the nature of that gene, and you ended up with the dark moth instead of the white moth. So it was a mutation that got naturally selected for and created a change in the species, basically. So I don't know what he's complaining about. So he's just, all they do is they put up this bullshit, and they have 21 minutes of rhetoric here, right? That's meant to convince this mass audience, and he had 103,000 views on this video. So 103,000 people, and I'm guessing 90,000 of them bought what he was saying without ever checking the facts. And I fact-checked every one of these fucking things, and I found nothing behind them. So,
don't you think what he did is an example of what they call the Trojan source? You do a quote,
yeah,
you attribute it, and then suddenly, if you check it out, you realize the book or the paper didn't say anything like
right
what he quoted it to say.
They count on that. Joe and I have talked about that before. Every time we've done an AIG video, we go and we look up whatever sources sometimes they actually give them, and it never says what they say it says. So they're counting. They're just going to say, look, here's, I'm citing this, oceanographic study scientist or whatever. Yeah. And they're counting on people never going to look at it.
Yeah. Mike Jones does that a lot. In fact, Dan McClellan's called him out on it several times.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
I'm trying to find this guy. Nope, not finding that. No. Oh, The Independent. Okay, he talks about that. Yeah, he goes, there's a big section of quote mining coming up here.
A geneticist from Cambridge University. You see, the majority of the supposed proof of the evolution of the peppered moths was provided by Dr. Bernard Ketterwell from Oxford University, who was so confident in his conclusions regarding the variation in moths driven by natural selection that he declared if Charles Darwin had only seen his experiments, he would have witnessed the consummation and confirmation of his life's work. That is, the confirmation of the story of evolution. And even though Ketterwell's work had been known to be suspect for years prior, such as the discovery that he'd glued moths to tree trunks to get pictures of them where they don't rest naturally, Majerus...
That's like the heckle thing.
Yeah, I got news for everybody.
Yeah.
When you watch National Geographic, whatever the show might be, when they have those awesome photographs of a lot of these animals and stuff, they are not actually in the jungle. Okay, they're in a tank, and it's all so that you can get a nice picture. So
Yeah.
Putting the thing on the tree to get a nice picture is not unheard of at all. It's just the set. It's a setup for a good picture. It's photography, folks. Okay, the moths don't cooperate, so you use a dead one. Yes, that's what they do.
So here's the stuff from ChatGPT. The genetic modifications involved in the peppered moth's wing coloration primarily stem from a mutation in the cortex gene, which plays a key role in melanism. The dark-colored melanic form of the peppered moth, known as carbonaria, resulted from the insertion of a transposable element in the cortex gene, which changed it. The TA insertion likely disrupted regulatory elements controlling pigmentation. So they would call that a loss of information, basically, but loss of information simply means that something changed in the gene regulatory networks, basically. And so this was an actual example of evolution in action. And that's why it was so important. And later on, other researchers verified Ketterwell's work. So he was vindicated in the end. I'm not sure if he lived.
But what is the ranking on this, Mike? Is this the number one evidence for evolution?
I've never thought of it that way, no. The number one evidence for evolution is reading 15 textbooks on genetics and molecular biology. That's the number one.
Calvin said we're all worshiping this moth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the moth.
I don't think I ever really talk about the moth.
Yep.
What it is the handy, teaching example. What's an example of natural selection? Oh, well, there's that peppered moth because this thing happened in history and everybody knew about it. And we can talk about this. And certainly there are other examples that teachers need to have ready and available. But, this is what they call a didactic purpose, and that is communicating or teaching little skulls of mush about natural selection.
And
this is something
that shows up in high school and grade and before that textbooks and stuff as a simple example. And because again, that they're going to go looking like Hawaiian Shirt Guy does at grade school textbooks and saying, "Aha! See, they're teaching this," and it's like Scott said, it's just a easy.
But it's
example.
a really good. It's a good example of natural selection and evolution that we have observed. And that's why they don't like it. It's because we actually observed this one, because we had the genome of the white moth and we have the genome of the black moth, and we can see that it was a mutation, and then we can see that it was selected for. And then I think it got selected for again after they shut down the soot, so that there wasn't soot on all the trees in England, because their air was pretty bad. And I think it switched back over to the other population. Had it not, like if those two populations had been genetically separated, right, and the black moths kept surviving because there was still soot in their environment, and the white moths basically stayed white moths, after 10,000 years, they would start to show other changes that happened the very same way that this did. And they don't like that because this is one we did observe. So, yeah,
Well,
it is.
And wouldn't it get to be like impossible for there to be all the genetic information put into everything so that it
Yeah.
could do their, form of rapid speciation or whatever that they do claim exists? I mean,
Yeah, it's not possible. No.
it's not possible to, because that's what they'll say, that supposedly there was a perfect genome or something that
Yeah,
had
yep.
all the information in it. And ever
Yeah, and it
since
just
then,
wasn't expressed. Yeah.
everything's just, right. So, yeah, that would be, you want to talk about the probabilities or the math or whatever. You're talking
Right.
about a huge number of the genome would have to be so huge to contain all that.
Yeah. Yeah, the difference between vertebrates and invertebrates, we can look at specific genes, like something called cadherins, and in the invertebrates there are 2 of those genes, and in the vertebrates there are 7 of those genes, and those are very similar genes. We can tell that the 2 genes that basically ended up in the invertebrates a long time ago mutated and duplicated and created the 7 genes that we have in the invertebrates, ended up being the 7 genes that we have in the vertebrates, right? And you can see that they mutated and they ended up doing different things and creating more complex organs, like I think difference between your red blood cells and the cells that stick your liver together, right, are all about these difference in cadherins and a bunch of other genes, of course. But you can see the pathway that that evolution took. And when you look at it with that when you look at it through that lens, through that microscope, then you truly start to understand evolution, understand what happened, and how these networks become more and more complex over time. And there are some frightening things about that too. But I might mention that later if I don't ask me about it. But anyway, so let's see. We're going on about the peppered moths for a little while. Oh, I got to put them back up, don't I? I have to put them back up. Put them back up. Okay, and I think no. What the hell? Come on, dude. Okay, so what do I? God, what on earth? Nope. Nope. It is so hard to figure out which one to use. There we go. Damn. These icons.
You got it.
Yeah, these icons don't really make sense to me. They don't really work. Okay.
Those criticisms, likely because he was a fellow evolutionist, shook up the evolutionary community quite severely. Case in point, even vociferous atheist and anti-creationist Dr. Jerry Coyne, in a review of Majerus's book in the journal Nature, said the following after hearing the peppered moth example perhaps wasn't all it was originally cracked up to be. My own reaction resembles the dismay attending my discovery at the age of 6 that it was my father and not Santa who brought the presents on Christmas Eve.
That was actually Jerry Coyne's criticism of other things in the book. And he was upset about some of the ways that Majerus portrayed some stories in evolution. So he's got this story all wrong. I mean, and the result of the story, like I said, is that the moth remains basically one of the poster children for evolution.
I don't know about you, but I'm gonna have to take a long shower after getting done with this video because he's just such a sleazy scumbag of a propagandist.
He is really a scumbag. Anyway, let's see. I'm going to switch ahead here.
Well, if you want to have a laugh at his expense, Scott, just remember that Ken Ham brought in Martin Isles and skipped over some of these people that have worked with him all these years.
Yeah, this guy.
Including Calvin here. So there you go.
Poor Calvin. Yeah.
No promotion for you, Calvin. You're stuck there in your closet there.
It's really weird that if you look Calvin up, no matter where you look, you can't find anything that qualifies him other than what he's doing right now, doing this shit, right? I mean, there's nothing that qualifies him in any manner to be on the screen telling us about evolution or anything else for that matter, even the Bible. He has nothing about his education at all online. Wonder why. I don't know. I'm a high school dropout, and I advertise that fact. So anyway.
As the British zoologist L. Harrison Matthews said in his introduction to the 1971 edition of Origin of Species, the experiments beautifully demonstrate natural selection, or survival of the fittest, in action. But they do not show evolution in progress, for however the populations may alter in their content or light, intermediate, or dark forms, all the moths remain from beginning to end Biston betularia.
Okay, so this guy, where's he at? Walter Veith, let's see, L. Harrison Matthews, Wiki, born in 1901, died in 1986. And he, let's see, honors, publications. So he was a reasonable scientist, biological sciences at King's College, Cambridge. Graduated first class. And I forget why he said what he said here, basically. He was skeptical about the way evolution was being portrayed, I think is what it was. Not entirely sure.
Well, often they have an issue with like a mechanism or something, right? And then you find out that it's not the whole thing. They accept evolution. They just disagree that, this actually does something, right?
Yep. Yeah, and then we have, let's see, The Independent, Steve Connor. I think he talks about him somewhere. He didn't like him for some reason.
That's how Discovery Institute conned all those people into the Descent from Darwin list, because they asked the wording like, is there always room to learn more about evolution or something like that? And everybody basically said, well, yeah, aha, see, they're dismissing evolution.
Yeah. And this guy, I think I looked him up, and he was commenting on something off the cuff somewhere, and they caught it and basically caught his quote, right? But he doesn't really have any big academic standing in the field of evolution, as far as I can tell. So who cares, basically? Who cares?
You see, Matthews, a committed evolutionist, understood that if evolution were true, then at one time there were creatures without lungs. Then lungs evolved. At one time there were creatures without wings. Then wings evolved. There were creatures without echolocation. Then that ability and all of its required genetic software and hardware, so to speak, evolved, etc. Evolution is supposed to...
You got that right.
Explain there's all the new stuff.
And there's an issue there with it being designed for bats, because not all bats use echolocation.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and how lungs evolved, how the liver evolved, all that stuff has to do with looking through a microscope at the fine details of how these mutations support differences in phenotype, basically. And this is the stuff that he does not understand about evolution. This is the stuff that he's never looked into. He's never looked any deeper than Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species, or the peppered moth, or the finches, or the stickleback fish. He just looks at the surface stuff, the stuff that ends up in the popular press. And if you're critical of evolution, you can't stop there. You have to go into the molecular biology and make your criticisms there. And I'd like to see him do that. Just once. Just once. Once, for fuck's sake. Let's see, 13. So we're getting there, man. We're actually cruising through this thing. Was that, 1359? I got something there. We got a little. Oh, let's see. What is this one?
Used improper methods to divine them. And some evolutionists, such as Steve Connor, the science editor for the Indie, the British liberal-leaning online newspaper called The Independent, tried to use the situation to make it seem like, once again, those silly creationists just don't understand evolution. He wrote,
silly creationists
smelt blood. The story of the...
What's that? Scott?
I just am repeating those silly creationists, for the most part, just don't understand evolution.
Yeah. So Steve Connor, basically science editor of the Independent, he won many awards for his journalism, whatever. And but he has to mention it's a liberal newspaper. What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with the science? Tell me. I don't know. Anyway.
Peppered moth became a story of how Darwinism itself was flawed, with its best known example being based on fiddled data. Quoting Majerus, he said, "The peppered moth story is easy to understand because it involves things that we are familiar with. Vision and predation and birds and moths and pollution and camouflage and lunch and death. That's why the anti-evolution lobby attacks the peppered moth story. They're frightened that too many people will be able to understand."
That's what he said. So, so what is his problem with that? That pretty accurately tells us the peppered moth is something that's easy to understand for high school students and for everybody else, right? And this guy was pointing out that freak's creation is out. So they got to take the story down. And that's what he did. He lied about Majerus and what he said in his book. He didn't tell the whole fucking story. He didn't explain that the peppered moth research has been vindicated and repeated by other scientists who didn't paste moths to trees or didn't have to.
Are you talking about Calvin or that editor?
Kelvin is doing that.
Because that editor, he looks like he was in the middle of saying something that really wasn't against, natural selection or whatever. But
he's saying the opposite. He's saying that the anti-evolutionary lobby attacks the peppered moth. He's calling Kelvin out, right? And Kelvin is showing it right on the screen, him being called out for what he's actually doing. They're scared to death of this peppered moth story, and they're scared of the stickleback and the antifreeze gene and all the other ones that are really good examples that everybody can understand and that we can observe, in real time. But you're not going to observe a fin or a fin turning into a limb in real time. You're not going to be able to do that. That is going to take hundreds of thousands or millions of years for that to happen. And so they got to take down the stuff that we actually do observe, which are the little parts. Anyway.
Understand. Now, do you see what he's trying to do here?
What's he
By
trying to
making
do?
it seem as if creationists were only focusing on whether the original research was flawed or not, he's saying that creationists are obfuscating the real argument and that they're trying to lure people away from truly understanding the peppered moth study. Which
yes, you got it. You're he's exposing himself.
Again, is supposedly the best known example of Darwinism and perhaps why they are so defensive.
I don't know who the fuck said it was the best known example, but it's a understandable example, right?
Yeah, he's taking understandable,
he said it was the moth.
Understandable and turning it into best.
Well, he needs to make up his mind. Is it the fish or the moth? Right? He's trying to say it's the best example, and it's like, wait a minute, you said it was the moth, now it's a fish. Make up your mind, Calvin. Come on. If you're going to rank them, let's put this stuff down so we can keep track, okay?
We got some stuff going on in chat here that I want to point out. S.J. Thompson said she became more Christian. As she became more Christian, she began to reject liberalism. Wonder why that is. I explained that is because she became a right-winger and therefore anti-scientific views. Star Song. Unfortunately, our representatives have forgotten that they are in Congress to represent us. So, yeah, that's shit. Let's see. Came with that baggage. She then went on anti-trans rant, claimed right-wingers are only ones who accepted real science. That's S.J. Thompson. Just got to keep an eye on what's going on in chat, guys. Got some good stuff happening. Anyway, what else are we going to say here?
We had quite a few folks joining us on both channels. So hello to everybody. Yeah.
What do we got? Let's take a look. And we got to do this again in about an hour and a half, so we're going to have to get through real fast. So anyway. How many you got on your channel, Dave? You check?
We got like 10 people over here.
I got 5 on mine, so we don't have that many. They'll be with us tonight on Saturday night at the Atheist.
Everybody's gearing up.
However, far from wanting the average high schooler or college student to know what the data shows, we wish everyone would come to understand it fully. Because it's just an example of natural selection, but is certainly not an example of evolution.
There it is.
The only point creationists made regarding the doctored evidence in the moth experiments was that evolutionists have been caught.
It wasn't doctored evidence. There were some things that he did that were considered experimentally suspect or whatever, but like I say, they went ahead and did the test again, and they verified what he was saying. So no, it wasn't doctored evidence.
Fudging their data to fit their story many times now. So people should be cautious of accepting it without serious consideration.
Well, the thing is, we've
Even
caught Calvin and his cohorts across the spectrum there lying constantly, misquoting constantly, misdefining, but they don't report on that. And they don't keep data on that, because you don't have to be a scientist to catch a creationist in a lie. You just have to watch one of their videos and you're going to catch them in a lie.
Yeah, he in this video, he's a crook telling you what crooks do. Basically, while he's being a crook, right? That's what he's doing. I mean, he's fudging to make it match his story is what he's doing, and then he's trying to project that onto us, which is just ridiculous. And the same with the not understanding evolution.
Raised a similar concern when he said this about the dubious experiments regarding the peppered moth, which had convinced him and so many others initially. It is also worth pondering why there has been general and unquestioned acceptance of Kettlewell's work.
Yeah, well, more criticism of Kettlewell.
So, who exactly is it that doesn't understand evolution? No one has observed evolution in action, and yet countless believers in the story of evolution, both lay people and scientifically literate specialists, claim to have done so. And yet, when pressed, most of the scientists will admit that big picture evolution is not demonstrable.
Shows a girl that's really fucking bored with her job or something. I don't know.
So when he says observed evolution in action or whatever, what is, of course, I know he wants to be as ambiguous as possible, but what are you expecting? I think you asked this earlier, but I just want to ask it again. What is he expecting? What is he, or what are people who honestly ask that question, what are they thinking they should see?
We should see a fish crawl out of the water in 2 generations, basically, and start walking around on land and lift itself up and develop elbow joints and all of that.
So basically, I should go down to my pond here and take out a lawn chair and just wait. And within a few years of doing that, I should be able to see one of these frogs in the pond crawl out, except this time they're bipedal and they're smoking a pipe and speaking frogese.
Well, next month, one of those rattlesnakes will develop 4 legs and be able to run at 20 miles an hour like a coyote and still be a rattlesnake, and he's going to come and get you, Scott.
Man, I tell you, I was off in the woods, actually. This is an old property. This is an old property, and I was looking for maybe somebody had thrown out a satellite dish out in the back, and of course the trees grew, and of course all sorts of thorns and thistles and bushes grew, and so I was going through that, and the whole time I was going, man, I bet I'm about to step on a rattlesnake or a copperhead or something, because it's getting warm. Like right now it's 67. I think it's supposed to get up in the 80s today, and I'm going to step on a rattlesnake. I bet I am, but it's just getting nerve-wracking.
Yeah, while you're looking where you're stepping, a rattlelody is gonna sneak up behind you and fucking eat.
That's what's
rattlelodies. Rattlelodies are horrible.
touting fancy sounding mechanisms like genetic drift,
Yeah, here we go.
non-random.
Here's the list that you were looking at. Okay,
Big fancy
sounding
terms.
mechanisms. It's like, oh God, I don't know what these.
See, what they're
things are.
hoping is that that the viewer and the listener will hear these words and remember, oh, Calvin, he kind of laughed at that. He kind of thought that was funny.
Yeah, it was funny.
There's speciation right there, and he just
Yeah,
said
I know.
earlier they
Yeah.
accept speciation.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand the concepts, or he wouldn't be able to laugh them down. But maybe he does. Maybe he is so slimy he understands perfectly. But it's his job to bring that wedge of doubt between creationists or their viewers and the actual information that has been studied and peer reviewed and published.
Yeah, 90,000 people lap this shit up. That is the problem. That's why we're doing what we're doing here today.
The mating, speciation, gene flow, founder's theory, etc., which all fall under the umbrella of examples of natural selection or of defective genetic mutations.
Diversionary tactics. No, those don't fall into that fucking umbrella. I don't know what these.
Yeah, they are not natural selection. They are different mechanisms.
Yeah.
But he made a graphic.
Mechanisms of population. Yeah, he made a graphic. Yeah. Yep. Okay, where are we here?
Yeah, he's just trying to
more
inoculate people and get them to scoff at these words when they hear them, rather than say, I wonder what that means. I wonder if there's a good video that explains it out there. Yeah. And there is. Go see Creation Myths, Dr. Dan, and then Zach. What's the gentleman's name? Zachary or Zach? I can't remember his last name.
I can't either. I can't remember names lately. I don't know. I don't have any room for names anymore. Ever since I started going through these fucking proteins, I don't remember names of humans anymore. I like proteins. They're better. So this is apparently a woman who's discerning, looking, she's reading this evolution stuff. I don't know what he's saying here. We'll see.
What the story of evolution actually depends on is an impressive amount of imagination, not observational science. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear it constantly in their explanations of how this supposedly turned into that over millions of years, and yet no one has ever observed anything close to that occur.
Yeah, because nobody's been around for 1,000,000 years, you dumb.
Yeah, maybe Calvin's like 500,000 years old and just hasn't seen enough of it happening.
Right. Yep. So the observation in evolution is we look at the extant species today, the animals we have alive today, and we see that some are more similar to others than others. And we see that. So basically we have this whole group of extant animals. That's the observation. The hypothesis is that some of them had a common ancestor. If you look at a bulldog and you look at a Doberman, your hypothesis, you're observing what is alive today, and you're thinking, oh, I think they may have had a common ancestor. And then that's your hypothesis. And then you go ahead and you try to figure out how that happened. How do we end up with a bulldog or a Doberman, right? From a common ancestor, like a wolf or a basic mutt dog or whatever the hell it is. So he's got the observation part wrong. What you do is you look at, like, okay, if you and your cousin don't know that you're related and you want to be sure, you both go and get your DNA tested. Now your dad, your mom, your granddad, your uncles could all be dead and buried, and they could still look at your genes and they could determine that he is your cousin. You could tell that just by observing what we can see today, and you infer a common ancestor from that. And science is about inference. And the other thing science is about is when you're reading science, when you're reading anything, when you're learning anything, you are imagining. They make imagination sound like it's like you made up a story just out of the blue. No. Well, imagination fills in the cracks.
I want to point this out really quick before we go forward. That his entire religion is based on a story that came out of somebody's imagination.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
to point out,
yeah.
and to point out, observations also include data, right?
Yeah.
They always want to make it about you have to see the animal changing before your eyes, and it's like, well, no, you can see,
That's not
you
enough.
can observe the data of genetics and fossils and everything, and that is often used by the creationists to say, see, there's no observation, and they leave out there's plenty of data you can observe.
Yeah, that's why they looked at the peppered moth and they got genomes from both of them and they compared them. And then they found a section that was an insertion in one of the regulatory genes. And then they went and found out that, oh, that had homology with a transposable element with one of these jumping viruses, or ERVs, like Donnie likes to call them all. They're not all ERVs, they're transposable elements. And that is the data. And then now we have a plausible mechanism. So we had an observation, 2 different colored moths, and we went back and we inferred that they had a common ancestor, went and looked at the genome and found out exactly what happened that made one turn into another. And that's what we do with every single part of evolution. That's what we do with fins and limbs. Basically, he leaves all that out. So let's see, where are we at? 1752. We're almost at the end, guys. It's like 21 minutes long. So
I just want to say I went and looked, and the Zach I was talking about is Zach B. Zach B. Hancock, and the YouTube
Zach B.
channel
Hancock.
Pop Gen, TALK, Pop Gen, all one word.
That's what it's called?
Yeah.
Oh,
it'll say Zach B. Hancock in the caption, but the channel is Talk Pop Gen. The handle for the channel is Talk Pop Gen.
Tilting Windmill was asking if we're still doing Saturday Night at the Atheists, and yes, we are.
We are. That's why
bonus.
we need a rest here. Yeah, we have a hard break here at 3:00. So, going on here a little bit.
Now, at this point in the argument, many evolutionists often retreat to elephant hurling, claiming that if creationists took into account the entire body of evidence from the fossil record, the geologic column, DNA studies, ape-man skulls, dinosaurs, etc., and put it all together, then we'd understand the evidence for evolution is simply overwhelming.
Yes,
and add embryology, and add molecular biology, add all that stuff together. Yes,
and remember, when we read a passage of the Bible, a scripture, a verse in an atheist skeptic kind of video, they get mad when we don't go back and consider the history of the Bible, the situation,
where, the context.
You need to compare it to other scriptures. Blah blah blah. Don't complain about that if you're not going to take into account the newer, not just the 1859 or whatever year it was, Charles Darwin publications, but the entire body of evolutionary theory that is digested for you very well in all sorts of YouTube channels around here, around this internet. So don't complain, Calvin, when you guys hear us speak disparagingly of a verse and then say you're out of context, because you got to get the scientific context for what you say you know.
Okay, we got 4 left. 4 bookmarks.
See what he's claiming? Well, yes, just like the hypothetical murder.
What did he claim?
Millions of pieces of evidence which no reasonable person.
Okay, nobody has actually seen evolution take place over a long period, but they have seen the after effects. The after effects are massively supported. It is like a case in court of law where nobody can actually stand up and say they saw the murder. But we can determine whether a person's guilty. So Dawkins is explaining that well, flawed as he is.
Can possibly dispute. See
Here's
what
a
he's
question.
claiming? Well, yes.
Do you really want a doctor who is so insistent on observation that he
Right.
will bypass X-rays and
Yeah.
imaging and
Cut you
lab
open.
tests and just go straight to cutting you open to see if you have cancer.
We have to crack the ribs in order to
Yeah.
figure this out. Yeah.
Do you have heart? Do you have blockage in your heart? Let's skip all that, all those tests, which are not direct observation.
Yeah.
And we'll just cut your heart open. Now, don't worry, we'll sew it back when we're done. We'll just cut your heart open and see if you have blockage in your arteries.
Or even worse, that doctor might refer to a textbook.
Yeah.
Written by another doctor.
Yeah.
Then he's just going to repeat what
that's
another
just
doctor already did.
Appeal to authority.
Well, he'll refer to the textbook, but it's from Dr. Galen back in the Roman Empire. That's the only book that counts.
Yeah. Yep. The true word of surgeons.
Get the leeches out. Get the leeches out.
Get the leeches out. And imagination. Your doctor is going to look at he's going to look at the X-ray. He's going to look at your scans, your blood work, and then he's going to imagine that you have a plugged artery. He's going to use his imagination. You always use your imagination when you try to understand something. And they make that sound like that's a bad thing. But you don't use your fucking imagination without evidence. That's the point. Anyway, okay.
Just like the hypothetical murder, no one has observed evolution, but all of the individual pieces of evidence can't be disputed. And yet...
Yeah, so we should let all those murderers go if we didn't see them murder? Is that what he's saying? Is that what he's saying? I mean,
there are a lot of murders that did not have an eyewitness.
When you want hypocrisy, AIG has a former forensics person working there.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
were you there? No, you weren't there. And yet she worked as a forensics expert, and now she works at AIG. It's like, people. I mean, come on, right? How much can they throw it back in your face that they're saying, that's Ken Ham's catchphrase, were you there, right? Yet there he has a forensics expert. So yeah, it's sometimes it's just really, you're just like, really, how does anybody swallow any of this when they're just blatantly throwing it out there that it doesn't matter what we say, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we got 2 bookmarks left, 3 actually, but we're going to roll through one here. So
all of them can be, and usually quite easily at that. Upon close examination, each and every piece of evidence, each individual example used to promote it, falls apart. In order to create
No, it doesn't. If it fell apart, we would have falsified evolution. And that's what we haven't done yet. And that's what these motherfuckers need to do. They need to get busy and falsify one of these steps, because that would tell us that something else happened, that it had to be a supernatural force, right? Mm-hmm. They know they can't do that. They are screwed. Okay, 1922, I think we're summing it up here. We got 2 bookmarks.
Definition of evolution used by Dr. Eugenie Scott, former executive director of the rather pretentious sounding and evolution defending National Center for Science Education.
Yeah.
By the way, notice her target audience when using the definition. The big idea is that living things, species, are related to one another through common ancestry from earlier forms that differed from them. Darwin called this descent with modification, and it is still the best definition of evolution we can use, especially with members of the general public and with young learners. Of course, under this definition, the very act of procreation between sexually reproducing organisms could be dubbed as evidence of evolution, because the offspring of all living things are obviously related to their ancestors and differ from them to some degree. No wonder.
Yeah, he's got it. He's saying it. He's repeating it. It's like, yes, offspring are always different than the parents, over and over and over again. We look at it, we observe it all the time. That's all I got for this guy. I think he said maybe says a prayer in the end, but
that's how ridiculous it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's saying here it is. Here's all the things of evolution. Here's natural selection that we're now adopting because we had it all along, right? Christians had it first, but we're gonna say Darwin is completely rejected. He doesn't know what he's talking about and was fibbing and everything else because he has a theory of natural selection. So it's just utter nonsense. It's complete utter nonsense.
And the other thing that they're trying to convince their audience of is that scientists have just looked at the peppered moth or looked at the stickleback fish or looked at a couple of examples, and then they concluded that evolution was true. No, they looked at the peppered moth, then they got the genomes, then they compared them, then they did some other tests, then they did some experiments, and they kept going and going and going. And everything we look at, we go down to the molecular biology and we find the mechanisms, the regulatory networks that develop an organism, and we look at it and try to figure out, infer, basically what kind of modifications happen in order for a big line of organisms, one without a liver to one with just a few cells where the blood from the stomach diverted into those cells and it had some function, to a bigger chunk of cells, to something that was like a proto-liver. And then the proto-liver started developing new mechanisms, new regulatory mechanisms for dealing with different toxins. And it went forward. And we know every step. So nobody is just looking at the peppered moth or reading the origin of the species and say, oh, evolution is true. That's not what I do. I spend every day looking into how this shit happens at the molecular level.
We covered the heart too when I responded to Rebecca at Bread of Life, who, by the way, said hi to me in the chat the one night. Did I tell you that?
No shit. Wow.
She actually said hi to me. Yeah.
She forgot that she banned you.
Yeah.
But
has she unbanned you yet? Are you banned over there, James?
I don't say anything over there. I haven't tested it. I've peeked at what she's doing on Sunday nights, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But we covered, from basically one ventricle to four ventricles, right? You can see it occurring over time.
Yeah. Yeah, this is important. I mentioned captive deaths. I mentioned once that the universe is not fine-tuned. I said they had it backward. We are fine-tuned to fit the environment. Yeah. And that's how evolution works.
Yeah.
And we know so much about this story right now.
It's top down, bottom up. It's the old argument. Yeah.
And I was looking today at mouse genomes and human genomes, right? And it turns out
can you hear the wind?
Yeah.
A little
it's
bit.
Windy out there. Yeah.
It's wind. I can hear it through the house. It's windy.
We had some incredible wind yesterday.
You don't observe the wind.
You don't observe. Yeah. Are you observing the wind? Yeah.
I'm observing it.
Anyway, mouse chromosomes.
Too.
Mice have like 20 and we have 23. Well, then some species of mouse in Germany have like 48, and there's mice chromosomes mutate more rapidly than ours. They combine and they split and all that. But anyway, chromosome 1 is like amazingly synthetic. Basically, it's very similar to ours in huge areas. And I thought that was interesting. And then you'll find in the human, you'll look at a gene and it's like in chromosome 16. And then you'll look at the mouse and it's in chromosome 10. And then you look at another gene and it's in chromosome 16. And the analog for the mouse is in chromosome 10. And you can see this, like if you think that all of this was designed, that God, took his little fingers and wrote all that, why in the fuck did he do all that stuff? Why did he split these chromosomes up, join some together, duplicate others? Why did he keep messing with the design when he could have had 23 chromosomes for everybody and just put a few in different spots so that they couldn't mate with each other, and you would have had viable organisms? I mean, it doesn't make any goddamn sense. The evidence for evolution is immense when you're willing to take the microscope out and look at the fine level. It is immense. And that's why 99% of scientists believe in it.
Well, in Christianity's defense, it was demons that did that with our chromosomes.
Oh, right.
which,
Yeah.
which is the
They
syntanic,
jumbled them. Yeah.
the syntanic panic.
Yeah. Yeah. Synthetic panic. Or satanic. Yeah. Syntanic panic. That's a
Yeah.
good one. I'm going to write that one down.
Do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Always love. Yep. Yep. New things. Syntanic panic. Okay, guys. We're going to go get a rest and we got, what, 1 hour?
Yeah.
1 hour, and we'll do Saturday Night at the Atheists, and we'll have some really, really terrible apologists with absolutely no credentials telling us what's wrong with science.
Yep.
By the way, Calvin has no scientific background. I did ask Copilot about it. He said, no, he considers himself as much well studied as Darwin was, and he was a theologian.
Rick and Lou are up on the block tonight, and yeah, I'm sure they would rather hang out with Calvin than us.
Well,
Okay, guys.
But I handpicked these guys. They are probably the worst apologists that I've ever come across. So
Yeah, you come up with a
it
really.
should be entertaining.
Yep. Anyway, let's get out of here and
All
take
right.
a rest. Okay. So thanks everybody in chat for showing up.
All right.
Thanks,
Definitely.
everybody.
Bye. Goodbye,
Talk to you
cool
later.
world.
Bye.
Bakura.